So Steven Crowder went on the Alex Jones show on InfoWars to talk about a lot of things, to talk about the censorship that has been hitting them, the censorship that's really just hitting the entire right wing and what you should do about it, plus a lot of other things that's very interesting. This is going to be a longer video most likely, so let's get right into these clips of Steven Crowder talking to Alex Jones in an InfoWars interview.
Yeah, this is a good example actually, because I know you wanted to talk about the gain of function. Or for example, January 6th is a big story right now. Here's the thing, we've sort of been off air, obviously, for a while, which I'm sure we'll get to. But when I heard everyone talk about the revelations regarding January 6th, I remember I was going, what revelations? Well, so they were escorted in. I'm going, okay, so what revelations? What's new? Well, there were feds there who were pushing people over the barricades. I go, yeah, okay, so what's new? Same thing. I was on a show recently. They were asking me about the new bombshells with a gain of function. I'm going, what do you mean? What's new? You mean that someone else admitted to it and it turns out maybe we funded it more than we knew? I mean, you have Joe Biden saying that he supports, right, the administration supporting gain of function research. January 6th, we ran these clips of the QAnon shaman within the month of it happening. We're suspended on YouTube, by the way, of him talking to a Capitol Police guard saying, all right, we'll bring you in single file, and him turning around in his silly Cookie Monster voice saying,
this is kind of how I feel about the entire, this is also a perfect frame to pause on right here. This is kind of how I feel about the entire Twitter files situation. I feel like everything that's been coming out in the Twitter files, and I haven't been keeping up with them for the last couple, because the first couple that came out, I was kind of like, okay, this is everything that we already knew was happening behind the scenes. We already knew all of these things that they were coming out with and acting like it's a huge story. Like everybody's tweeting about how this is such a big story and doing these YouTube videos about how this is such big stories. And I'm like, dude, we already knew all this stuff was happening. The only difference is now Twitter themselves is coming out with it. So it's not groundbreaking information. This isn't breaking news. This is just another source, another person coming out and saying the same thing from the inside instead of the outside. So I understand what Crowder is saying here. I understand how he's feeling. I do feel like with the January 6th stuff, there was a lot more to be gained. I personally hadn't seen that footage of the QAnon shaman being shuffled around and them, the police officers, the guards trying to unlock certain doors within the Capitol building. I didn't personally see that previously. So maybe he saw that footage. I don't know. Maybe it was just buried so hard that I wasn't able to see it. I hadn't seen it until Tucker Carlson came out with that footage. So, if they knew about it, if most people knew about it, then I guess they feel the same way that I feel about the Twitter file situation. So I definitely see where he's coming from on this one.
All right, we have to be peaceful. And we did a whole sketch about it. We had the QAnon shaman in the studio as an ongoing sketch because we knew that he was escorted in. So
that's true. They did have the QAnon shaman, in the studio all the time.
I guess we have a slightly new angle from a different security camera as far as footage, but there's no really new information. Like you said, you've been talking about a lot of these things for decades, but certainly as it relates to these stories, my question is, why are people thinking that this is new? What disservice are not only the media, but even, let's be honest, right-leaning media, what kind of a disservice are they doing to their viewer that the viewer didn't know until the last 2 weeks that January 6th was largely people being escorted into the Capitol building with some vandalism and trespassing? Why are people now thinking?
It's true. There is an entire, a massive disservice that is being brought to us, that is being brought to the people, these viewership of these different news outlets. There's a massive disservice being done to their viewers because they never tell them the truth. And I don't care if it's Fox News, I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, all they are is propaganda networks, much more than they are news networks. And I know a lot of people out there like to defend Fox News, and they're definitely not as bad as CNN or MSNBC or a lot of the left-wing networks. It's definitely not as bad. But if you're out there thinking that Fox News isn't a propaganda network, then you're stuck in the Matrix. You are a sheep. Because they are, like I said, not as bad as the others, but they definitely are a propaganda network. There's no doubt. They only push one side. And obviously they'll have some lolcows on there. They'll have some people from the left on there just to get laughed at, just to get, trashed on. But they are a propaganda network just like all the other ones. And it's a massive disservice to the viewers. It's a massive disservice, not just to the viewers, not just to the people watching, but the entire country, because those people are going to go tell their family members and their friends what they saw on Fox News or what they saw on CNN. And that's going to spread like wildfire. That's going to spread through Twitter. It's going to spread through Facebook. Everybody's going to be believing this information that is being brought to us by these propaganda networks. And that's why shows like Steven Crowder's show, like Alex Jones' show, like all these other different shows are so important. Like James O'Keefe. That's why people like James O'Keefe are so important, because they're actually people out there searching for truth and trying to spread the truth the best that they possibly can.
Well, right, Alex, where your talent and your creators, people will come and they go, oh, they're really good. They pay them more, but then they say, you know what, we're going to have to lay you off or then lower the salary. But I will tell you this is the most important issue of our time. I mean, taxes are important. Yes, government corruption is important. This ties into government corruption. But the idea that there are no men and women, that they are fundamentally interchangeable, that's when society collapses. And this isn't even the first story, by the way. I was suspended, throttled on Facebook, I want to say 2014, 2013, for talking about Fallon Fox, the person who lived as a man for 32 years of his life, I believe fathered children, and then fractured women's skulls.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to get too deep on this issue, but it definitely is the biggest issue of this time. Steven Crowder is spot on with that. A lot of people are going to disagree. A lot of people are going to say the war in Ukraine is probably the most important issue. There's a lot of other things that you could say. You know, the banking collapse is a pretty big issue. Obviously, the inflation is a big issue. But I definitely think that men being interchangeable with women is the biggest issue of our time. Steven Crowder is spot on with that one, because think about it. Since the beginning of time, men have had this burden of performance to where they had to create to be something. You had to create things. You had to create wealth. You had to create something for the universe, something that's useful for everyone else, whether that's entertainment, whether that's technology, whatever the case may be. In order to be somebody, to leave your mark on the world, you had to create something. So that's why we're so advanced today, because think of one great female inventor. You can't think of one. I guarantee you can't think of one. That's because the burden of performance has always been on men, and it's been inherently known by all males that the burden of performance is there. You must create. You must become in order to leave your mark on the world. If you're a man, if you're a woman, you can get on yachts. You can get in the room with millionaires just by looking good on Instagram. There's not much that you have to do if you're a woman. Now, you can choose to do it if you want to, but the burden of performance is not there like it is for men. And that's why we are where we are today in society, because the burden of performance has been on men, and it's been inherently known. So we just come out the womb and we understand that we have to create. We have to invent. We have to continue and to push the world forward. That's why we have cities. That's why we have roads. That's why today's society is so privileged the way that we are. So where we can worry about stuff like this, where we can have Antifa out there burning down buildings, BLM burning down buildings over issues that other countries wish that they could worry about. Instead, they're worrying about where their next meal is going to come from. They're worried about getting clean drinking water, and we're worried about, you know, racial issues and if we should call men who dress up like women, if we should call them men or women. Like, it's ridiculous, dude. So when he says that this is leading towards the collapse of society, to where whenever we have men who are interchangeable with women leading towards the collapse of society, he's spot on with that. Because if we have no men with that burden of performance, we're going to go downhill. Who's going to run the military? Who's going to fight wars whenever the time comes? Because it is going to come eventually. Who's going to continue to invent so that we don't get surpassed by other countries? Who's going to continue to push the world and society forward? There's going to be nobody. Because if you don't want to be a man, if you don't want to have that burden of performance, if you want to escape that burden of performance, before there was no escape, but nowadays you can just become a woman if you want to. You just get celebrated like Dylan Mulvaney for simply acting like being a caricature of a woman. It's ridiculous, dude. And it definitely can lead very fast to the demise of the Western world.
In the cage, and lied, by the way, about his biological sex. And I don't even know if he's still living as a woman. So this is something that we've been facing for a very long time. And the most important thing with Mug Club, and people can sign up, louderscredit.com/Mug Club. We'll be coming back March 20th, along with 3, 4, 5 other shows, $10 cheaper than it was before. It's about decoupling from big tech. Look, when you were removed, Alex, I think we had you on the next day, within 48 hours. And we had you on YouTube. And I don't know how we got away with that, because there was a policy, persona non grata, Alex Jones on YouTube. I was disappointed that a lot of other people didn't. Even though you and I have some fundamental disagreements, I feel compelled to poke my finger in the chest of people who tell you what you can.
And by the way, and that's why people love Steven Crowder and others like him so much, is because he does feel compelled to poke his finger where other people tell him that he can't. And that's why we need to continue to call out this stuff, this trans BS. That's why I've been going so hard on it recently, because I'm starting to realize more and more how big of an issue this actually is. You know, not only is it the sports stuff, I feel like the sports stuff is definitely a big issue. Obviously, we don't want women getting, killed by men in the ring and stuff like that, and wrestling and boxing and MMA, whatever it is. We don't want women getting killed by men in those, sports. But what's even a bigger issue is the demise of the Western world, like I described earlier.
Here's Matt Taibbi talking about what he was able to examine. I will tell you this. We have been suspended, removed myself from Twitter. On Facebook, that was a national article, right? That was Engadget. That's how I met my lawyer when they were censoring Ted Cruz, the Chris Kyle Foundation, and myself. Of course, the Vox apocalypse with YouTube. And we've had many conversations with people at Google, as you well know. One time we were doing a Change My Mind out. This has been going on for a long time, and I have at some point been suspended or throttled from every single platform. Here's something that no one else knows this, Alex. With Twitter, there were some reporters who were talking about going through the documents with Twitter. And I said, hey, you know what you may want to look into? look into the advertising accounts with Twitter, because what happens is they court you, ask you to advertise on Twitter. This happened with me on Twitter. We actually had a legal dust up with Twitter that we won. They said, hey, come advertise your profile here on Twitter. We'll create a campaign so you increase your followership. This is when I didn't have a lot of money. It might have been a few $1,000s, right, every couple of months. Then they said, oh, you know what? We're going to actually have to punish you and remove you from the ad account because this campaign is a violation of our guidelines. I said, wait a second. You guys wrote the copy for the campaign. So I told people who were reaching in and doing the prodding, I said, look into the advertising accounts because this isn't the only place that it's happened. Not a peep. And then it took a third party like Matt Taibbi to come out and say, actually, this is going on. We know this has been going on. We've had conversations behind the scenes that this has been going on. I've had senators and congressmen, people high up ask me what's going on, sent them information. And then what ends up happening? Grandstanding. Doesn't it just sort of just boggle the mind when you go, hold on a second. Nothing's been done about 230. Nothing's been done when Republicans had power. Nothing has actually been done. That, to me, is the biggest failure of the Trump administration. They had the opportunity to do something, and you know why? Because people on the right are afraid. They are pacified by people in big tech. And I understand it. It's this big Leviathan, but it's only going to get more powerful if we allow it to be. And Alex, I know you've always been more libertarian, but let me ask you this here. Do we honestly believe that it's a free company? They can do whatever they want at this point when they're benefiting directly from the government
and also, yeah, like he was about to say, working directly with the government and taking orders directly from the government. And it seems like, like I said, we already knew that this stuff was happening before the Twitter files, but seeing exactly what the FBI and other alphabet organizations were saying to Twitter, it's kind of like do this or else type thing. It's not just, hey, can you please do this? It's like do this or bad things might happen to you. If you don't do this, bad things might happen to your company if you don't do this. So not only are they working with them, but it seems like they're kind of threatened by them to comply with whatever they want them to do. And he is right. The right needs to stop. The conservatives, Republicans need to stop playing nice. They need to stop being so passive, stop being so scared, because the left owns our entire media. I tweeted something out earlier of some kid show talking about, it was like a animated show of two bison. If you haven't seen it, go check out my Twitter. The link will be in the description. Is at Justin Loss with 2 T's. It's two bison talking. And they're talking about how the younger one is talking to an older one, saying that they identify as non-binary and that their pronouns are they, them, because they don't know if they're male or female. It's a children's show with two animated bison talking about this. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's what Steven Crowder is talking about. That's what Alex Jones is talking about when the right needs to stop being so passive. We need to stop playing nice. It's time to step up and actually make some real change when it comes to big tech instead of making all these false promises and never following through on them. Let me know what you guys think about this entire interview with Steven Crowder and Alex Jones. Let me know what you think about the entire situation.